My biggest piece of advice would be listen to your heart, listen to your brain, and think about what you want, as opposed to being really quick to listen to your parents, your friends, your teachers, the people around you, because they're biased. They had their own experiences that made them the way they are.
Any predictions in content marketing? And the second question to that, any predictions in the world of marketing in general?
I think this applies to both, but obviously generative AI is here to stay. I still talk to a lot of marketers online and just personally in my life who are saying, well, Gen AI is here to take our jobs. It's horrible. It's taking away human elements of marketing. It's getting rid of creativity. And my response to that is, okay, but it's here to stay. So either you can complain about it, you can see how it's ruining your life, it's taking your career from you, or you can learn to work with it, you can upskill alongside Gen AI, you can learn to use it to your advantage, and then you can stay ahead of the marketers who are complaining. When I was looking for people on LinkedIn, for instance, to learn from, is that I would search based on topics, and then I would do my research on the people who would pop up, and I would see, how are they staying relevant? How are people reacting to their content? Are they just blowing up because of pods and AI engagement, or are people really valuing what they say?
Hey friend, today our guest is Marina Krivonossova. She is the founder of the B2B content marketing agency called Retold. She's very passionate about bringing the power of storytelling and human-led content into content marketing, especially in the B2B context. I'm very excited for you to listen to the podcast. Enjoy the show. So how did you get into marketing, and where are you based currently? What's the kind of current situation you're in?
So the whole life backstory is that I was born in Russia. When I was little, my dad got a job offer in the US, in the Bay Area in California. So we moved there. I lived there for most of my life. I grew up there. I consider California my home. I did some schooling down in Southern California as well, so kind of just moved up and down the coast. And I always had a dream of living in Europe, just general Europe, which is such an American thing to say. But again, growing up, we traveled a lot. So I went to a lot of different countries in Europe. So I wasn't even picky with where. I was just like, I want Europe. I want something different. Any Europe. I'll take any Europe, right? I just wanted something different. I was really looking at Switzerland, but the opportunity came to go to the Netherlands. And I knew like nothing about the Netherlands. I knew it exists.
Oh, okay. Right.
I knew Amsterdam, there's windmills, tulips, the Dutch wooden clogs. But I was like, what? Let's see what happens. Worst case scenario, I can always go back to California and continue life as it was. But life happened. I came to the Netherlands. I left. I came there again. And now I've been living here for a total of about 7 years. Ended up getting married, launching my own business, kind of making this my semi-permanent home. I always say semi-permanent because I don't think I could live or commit to one place for the rest of my life. I'm too much of a traveler, too much of a nomad for that. But for now, the Netherlands is the place I call home. So that's on the personal front. And
the good thing about living in Europe is that in a way it's every other European country is like an hour away, so it's there's a benefit to that, but I'll let you carry on.
No, that's like my favorite thing, honestly, because US, you can see a lot of different things in a lot of different states, but ultimately it's all still America. Everyone speaks the same language, the culture is very similar regardless of where you go. Maybe some political differences, but overall it's just America. But here, I hop on a train, I can go to Paris, I can go to London. I did a random spring in Croatia. We lived in Spain for a month. It's just a completely different dynamic, and I absolutely love that. I love new experiences, new foods, new people, new climates. So for me, it's just such a difference to be here.
For sure. Do you have any plans on traveling to other countries this year, like in the spring, summer?
I'm kind of playing it by ear. That's always what I do. We're just kind of figuring out where are the best prices, what are we feeling in that moment. I know a lot of people who are like, spring 2027, I'm going to be in Japan. And I'm like, I don't know where I'll be next month.
Too far ahead. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely just playing it by ear. That's also the benefit of being here. There's so many nice last minute flights and last minute accommodations that I don't feel like I have to book everything so far in advance. Right.
And you don't get stressed out having to book it in advance, and then, it's like you look forward to it, but then you're not present, so I think it's good. Playing it by ear kind of relates to intuition. So on the marketing front, how did you get into marketing? What's that transition?
Completely by accident. I feel like a lot of things people ask me, like, how did this happen for you? I'm like, by accident. Everything happened to me by accident.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a very STEM-oriented family. My dad's had the same job since we moved to the US. So he's very corporate, very STEM. He's in computer science. My mom went down that direction as well, math and computer science. And it's kind of the Russian immigrant way. I'd say Eastern European, Asian way. The immigrants who end up in the US, they very much relate to that. I had a lot of like Ukrainian friends growing up, a lot of other Russian friends, Bulgarian, Korean, Indian, everyone from kind of like Eastern Europe and Asia. And we all had the same. We were all pushed in the STEM direction, like doctor.
Get a proper job.
Get a real job,
Doctor,
you know?
lawyer,
Exactly.
I get it.
Exactly. But unfortunately for my family, while I was good at that at school, it's not what I was really passionate about. It's not what really brought me joy. And I'd always been more creative. I'd always been more of a writer. And my family, they did not support it. They were like, yeah, that's cool, go for it. But kind of on the side. So like I remember telling my dad when I was like 15, I was reading this amazing book and I was like, I want to write a book one day. And he goes, yeah, that can be a good like side project on the weekends. And I was like, oh, that's fine, I guess.
Right, on the weekends, right.
Yeah, so I don't know. I was doing like little side gigs having to do with writing and marketing without even realizing it. I was building websites, I was managing UX, I was copywriting, I was doing social media, but it was always kind of just a side gig, just for now, just part-time. And this kind of started really early for me, but continued as I got older, as I was studying completely different things, thinking I was headed down a completely different path. I studied programming, I did some economics, I almost got an economics degree. Then I switched to international relations. I was really like,
wow.
Yeah, all over the
That's
place.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was moving through it so quickly and I was always doing marketing and writing on the side. But again, I never saw it blossoming into anything more until after I got my master's degree. Again, completely unrelated field, political science. But I was living in the Netherlands and I was like, okay, what should I do now that I live here? What should I do for work? I've done all these other things, but what can I really do as a career here? And I thought about it and I looked at my own experience and I kind of reflected and I was like, I've been doing marketing for ages. Like cumulative experience, I have years and years of marketing experience under my belt. So I got a full-time role in the Netherlands in the marketing space and I've just been doing that ever since. And I love it. And I think also to my family, it proved that, this is a real job.
You're getting you're getting income at the least. Yeah.
Exactly. And that made them see, okay, so this is something she can do. She can, channel her creativity into the work she does as a marketer, as a writer, without sacrificing the things that they think are essential, like having a house and having a more or less steady income and again, stability. I always say, stability because nothing's really stable, whether you're in corporate, startup, or entrepreneurship. But I think it really showed them that, that's possible. That's a thing people do. So they just kind of grew up with that more narrow mindset because of where they're from. But seeing me go down this path made them realize, there's more you can do.
That's an interesting sub point there because I think a lot of our, the past generation is, because change wasn't as fast as it is for us now, our generation. It's like in terms of content marketing, like every month there's a new channel update, there's a new algorithm hack. So I think for us, we're kind of comfortable with change, especially like Gen Z. For them, it's like, whatever, I'm going to be a barista this week, next week I'm going to be a priest. There's those kind of paradigm shifts that they're more comfortable with. What about marketing? What is it that you enjoy about marketing that you didn't enjoy in economics or political science? Any specific output that you do? Is it the creativity? Is it the fact that you can have an idea and then put it out there?
I think it's the fact that it's very dynamic. So as you said, it's not, marketing, there's general marketing concepts that remain the same, right? But overall, it's such a dynamic field, especially in our world where technology is evolving just so much. I go on a holiday, I come back and people are talking about 3 new platforms and I'm like, what happened? Was I in a coma? How long was I out? But I just went to Mexico for 2 weeks. So I love that. I just love being able to see all these new developments happen before me and having to figure out how to adapt to them, how to make them work for myself, for my clients. I think that's really interesting. And it keeps my brain functioning all the time. It keeps my brain turning and I'm always learning. And that's such a big part of marketing that I enjoy.
Yeah. It's funny. I looked at your LinkedIn, and we'll talk about human-led marketing because that's quite an interesting point in how a lot of marketers and entrepreneurs need to think about how they do content marketing. Is when I see your post, it's so genuine, it's so human. Is that something natural to you, or is that you studied how to do human-led marketing? I guess let's talk about what is human-led marketing to you.
So to me, human-led marketing is the idea of focusing on the people who you're actually speaking to in marketing, as opposed to really focusing on the algorithms, the social media trends, the platforms themselves. It's really about having those conversations and sharing those stories in a way that'll resonate with other humans.
Right. So when you're like writing, do you already think of a specific person who's going to read it, or are you just thinking of an individual that will resonate with this? What's your approach there?
I definitely think about the people who are going to be reading it. So I have a lot of questions always turning in my head. How are they going to react to this? What kind of emotions will this stir up in them? What are they going to feel when they finish reading it? What are they going to want to do when they finish reading it? Kind of what actions are they going to take? So there's always so many things stirring in my head. And again, that's part of what I enjoy in my line of work. It can get a little overwhelming, but there's always these questions turning with every single post I create during the creation process and even after I post it.
Right. So how did you learn that approach? Was it just natural, or did you like follow other people doing the same thing? Did you study a course in writing? How did you gain that skill?
So for me, it was natural. I would not say that I took a single course that made me realize, this is how you should do it. This is the human approach. So for me, that's something that I always enjoyed. And I guess why I always didn't resonate with the more STEM fields, because it's always formulaic. It's always templated. It's always, 1 + 1 = 2, no matter what. Right. And I didn't like that. It makes sense. But at the same time, I was always the person who was like, but what if we could do differently? What if, just what if, right? So no, I've always just been telling stories. I've always been interested in emotions. I've always been interested in psychology. And I've learned about these things as I went. But the initial idea of storytelling and taking that human-led approach was something that came naturally to me, I would say.
Right. Let's talk about Retold. What's Retold, and how did you go from a marketer to, I guess, now kind of being an entrepreneur and helping other entrepreneurs create content? What's that transition like?
Completely by accident.
That's the theme of the podcast, completely by accident.
That's true. I love that. But I always knew I wanted to have my own company because it was just something I wanted to do. I didn't know if it would end up being a bakery or my own publishing house or even my own, programming company, whatever it was. I had all these ideas, but I knew that I wanted to try my own thing instead of working for someone else. That's just an idea I always had. But again, because of the way I was brought up, the ideas that were kind of instilled in my head, I always thought, well, it's scary, it's risky, and it's for later. It was always for later, not for a specific day or time in the future, just not for now. Right. And I worked kind of my way through the ranks in marketing, and I was head of marketing at the Scale Up. And I was enjoying the work I do. I liked the people I worked with, the clients. I liked everything about it, but I wasn't happy. And I got to talking to a friend from LinkedIn, actually. He invited me to a conference. We were chatting, and he had just launched his own company. And I was telling him, I was like, oh, it's super exciting. And he's like, yeah, how's your work going? And I was like, it's fine. And he's like, oh, you don't seem excited. I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, everything's great. Everything's so good. And I went, through the points. And I was like, yeah, this is good. But I'm just not happy. And we talked more about it. And he goes, hey, have you ever thought about starting your own company? And I was like, well, yeah, but it's scary, it's risky, I have like a job. And he's like, yeah, but if you don't do it now, then when are you going to do it? And I kind of felt called out because I was like, get out of my head. Like,
I get that.
Yeah, you're right. But also, hearing it said aloud, it's kind of different. So I got to thinking about it just within those next couple hours. We talked a little more about it. And then I got home and I go to my husband. I'm like, hey, what if I just started my own company? And he's like, that's a fantastic idea. He's like, I always wondered when you finally would do it. And I was like, really? Interesting. And I brought it up with my mom, with my sister, just some people I'm close to, kind of bounce ideas back and forth, see how they, thought about me starting my own thing. And everyone was so supportive. They were like, you were meant to do this. It's just,
that's awesome.
Yeah, they were just like, it's just a matter of time. When are you going to do it? And it was kind of a position where I realized my marketing contract, my full-time one, was expiring, and it was already set for renewal. We discussed that with the CEO. We were going to renew it. But to me, just mentally, it was an idea of, okay, I'm not getting fired and I'm not quitting. I'm just not going to renew my contract. And
Right.
that means it's a perfect opportunity to start from scratch and try my own thing. So that's exactly what I did. The company where I work, they were super supportive. The CEO was like, yeah, you know what? I can see you doing that. That makes sense.
Right. That is
So,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
no hard feelings. It was all great. And within a month, I went from why am I unhappy in my job to, oh my God, I have my own company now.
Right. And I think I don't want to, for our listeners, I don't want to urge everyone to all of a sudden be an entrepreneur, but I do think every individual is meant to do more than, well, they're meant to be more than their job titles, right? So going back to before we officially started recording about, being more than your job title, essentially, not being too attached to it. It's just a part of your personality. But I want to kind of zone in on Retold. So it's so tell the audience what Retold is, and I'll ask a question.
Yeah, so Retold is a B2B content marketing agency. Simple as that.
Right. Why B2B specifically? Do you think there's a difference between direct to consumer B2C content marketing, or is that just a kind of ICP you're trying to target?
So there's definitely a difference in B2C versus B2B. And the reason I decided to go for B2B is the reason that I love telling stories and taking that human-led approach, which I less often see in B2B. It's way more common in B2C for marketers and companies to be like, yeah, we're working with people, we're talking to people. But in B2B, it's always like, oh, we're talking to a company. We're trying to do account-based marketing. We're trying to reach all these brands. And I'm like, ultimately, yes, but no. Because who's going to be the one reading what you write? Who's going to be the one giving you money? Who's going to be the one interested in what you're offering? It's a person. It's not a brand. It's not a vague entity. It's not a company. So I love taking that human approach and bringing it into B2B. I think that's kind of where the need is for it.
No, I definitely agree. I think I'm noticing that trend anyway, where a lot of B2B companies, even entrepreneurs, there's a lot more of them. You can call it personal brand building or content marketing, but it's essentially creating content to connect with individuals much more than, like what you said, big brands. And what would be your approach? So let's say a founder of B2B SaaS, just for the sake of giving an example, what would be your first approach? Let's say this founder has never done any form of content marketing. They don't like writing. What's your framework for working with them? Do you have like a process of onboarding them?
Absolutely. So I have a self-assessment that I have every prospect complete before we even decide if we're a good fit to work together. So I take a moment to just have you answer some questions. It's very simple, very straightforward, but I get to know you, your personal needs or how you envision them, a little bit of background behind your company, whatever it is you do. And after seeing that, I can tell you, can I help you accomplish what you're looking to accomplish based on your background and your goals? Or do I think I'm not the partner for you? So I have a very organized process in that sense. And I take a very, I hate this word because it's so like overused, bespoke. But what I mean by that is everything I do is meant to suit the client that I work with. So I was just telling someone earlier today, I have clients who've never heard my voice because they just don't have the bandwidth for calls and, even voice notes. They just like a direct email to email, DM to DM kind of communication. And I'm all for that. If you want to do that, sure. I have other clients who kind of want that familiarity. They want to get to know me a little better. They want to, have that rapport built. And that's also okay by me if that's what you're comfortable with. So everything I do is completely, tailored to you. So before we get started, I make sure I get to know you and understand if I can support you in the way that you need it. Because I understand that I'm not a fit for everyone.
For sure. What do you say to founders who are more skeptical about creating content, maybe not just like, creating content on LinkedIn, but YouTube, maybe even kind of building their personal brand? Let's say there's a maybe fear that they have. What would be your advice to those founders?
Well, I'd ask, what kind of fear is it? Is it the fear of being seen? Is it the fear of negative response? I want to dig deeper into that fear. We're back into human psychology right here.
Right. So that psychology course must have helped then, or at least you're learning a bit.
Exactly. So I always dig deeper.
Right. For me, for someone who I wish I started content marketing a lot earlier, I think for me personally, it was specifically imposter syndrome. I think that's probably a good 70% of the reason why most people don't create content. It's either I'm not good enough, or the content I do, it's going to be a rehash of another person's, or I need more experience. It's these voices, So I think as part of your Retold, your agency, do you kind of feel like you're coaching the founder too? Is that part of the content marketing process, or is it just focused on content marketing?
Depending on the founder, depending on the person I'm working with, it can definitely be a part of our collaboration process. Because in terms of the fears that I've seen people try to work through, imposter syndrome is indeed one of them. There's also the idea that, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in the spotlight if I create content. I'm so scared of, people hating me or people noticing that I did something wrong. So that's another one we work through. But yeah, definitely something I do my best to help with.
Right. So I want to segue into content marketing and social media, because I think both marketing channels or skills are kind of very much correlated. How do you keep up to date with all the new platforms, the news? There's so much happening. And how do you decide which platform to use in the first place?
So I know there's some controversy on this, but I'm not the person to jump on new platforms immediately just because they exist, because I would lose my mind. I like to stay up to date by just, staying on the relevant channels for me. So that tends to be LinkedIn, Instagram at the moment. That's where I get a lot of the information that I'm interested in. TikTok's kind of a weird area at the moment, but I find that I learn a lot on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I remember when Threads came about and Blue Sky was launched, and people were just jumping on those. They're like, oh, this is the next best thing. And I'm like, do you guys remember Clubhouse? And most people will say, I have no clue what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Because Clubhouse, you said, so you must actually know what it is.
I know what it is, but I know that it died after a few years.
It died much sooner than that.
If there's a new social media platform, there's a lot of hype, but I think it's more about when there's no hype, that's where you should be. YouTube's a channel that's kind of boring, but it's the second largest search engine, So,
yeah, you're so right. Yeah. And I wouldn't say stable because you never know what'll happen, but it's kind of been established. And there's YouTube long videos, there's YouTube shorts. I think it's a fantastic channel. But when Clubhouse came about, it was invite only. And I remember people just fighting on all the other platforms. Oh, who can get me an invite? Who can get me on there?
Right.
And when the platform kind of died down, when the hype died down, I had so many unused invitations because nobody wanted them anymore. And this was genuinely for me within the span of maybe 1-2 months. So it went immediately from, oh my gosh, this is the next best thing, to, I don't really care about this anymore. So I'm not quick to hop on those trends. I give it time. I see what happens. I know that, again, some marketers like to be at the forefront of everything. They want to establish themselves before the platform gets bigger. I don't have the bandwidth to do that, so I don't pretend I do. But I like to kind of, I'll create my accounts, I'll secure the usernames, I'll deactivate them, and I'll watch from the background and see what's happening. Because I'm watching right now Blue Sky become basically Twitter. A lot of people were saying, no, it's the positive version of Twitter. But I'm like, yeah, but when you have real people involved, some will be positive, some won't be. So ultimately, it's just going to become another platform. So I like to wait things out. That's my approach.
I agree. So it's for me, obviously as a marketer, it's good to be aware of what's happening, what's about to happen. But at the same time, like you said way back earlier, fundamentals never change. So I feel like if a platform is driven, if people join a platform because of hype, that's the wrong foundation. You want people to join because there's engagement already, or people can express their thoughts, stuff like that. So I mean, with Threads Blue Sky, I don't even have an account. I know that people are, jumping on there and there's a lot of attention, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel, I don't know if you've heard of School. It's like a community platform.
No.
Yeah, School's there's a lot of hype around it, but I think it's because the founders of School have pumped a lot of advertising on Facebook to push the platform. It's not really organic growth. It's someone who has a lot of money just paying for users, essentially. Anyway, going back to content marketing, social media. So you said you use LinkedIn, Instagram, and those are your kind of, I guess, bread and butter. Those are your main channels. Yeah,
those are my primary ones because, again, I've tried my hand with Twitter. Over the years, I've kind of been on and off, and I understand it. Well, I did. Maybe a year ago or so, I stopped being as helpful as I was with clients because of all the different changes taking place. But I thought it was a good place to network with journalists, for instance, in the past. So at the moment, with everything happening, indeed, Instagram and LinkedIn is where I spend most of my time.
Right. Yeah, I think with Twitter, it's I don't know, I just never grew on Twitter. I think you have to be controversial to grow. But how about in terms of when you come up with content marketing ideas, do you have like a list of ideas, or is that just natural? You just know who you're creating content for and you just kind of, I guess, improvise while you're writing?
I wish I could improvise fully. That's kind of the dream. But I feel like anyone who says they do that has a way better brain than I do, or is a liar. It's one of those two things.
Right.
Because I think for me, while I do have a lot of ideas circling in my head, if I just sit down to write and tell myself, you got to write 20 posts today, it's just not going to happen. Because I get my inspiration kind of at the most random moments. So the approach I take is I have a little note on my phone that I keep. And if I'm out and about, if I'm doing something, and an idea just comes in my head, I'm like, oh, that would be a cool thing to tell people about. That would be a cool thing to get discussions going. I'll just jot it down. So when I do sit down to write, I have my list of inspiration to draw from, and it doesn't feel as pressured and forced.
Yeah, the options. Yeah, that's really good approach. Yeah, there's a thing about writing where I read this from a book on writing, that the worst thing you can do as a writer is kind of stare on a blank page. It's good to at least have like a word or a title, something you can latch onto. In terms of upskilling, because obviously content marketing, there's a lot of things that goes along. It's not just writing. There's, if you do YouTube, there's video editing, podcasting, which is kind of audio, video based content. Who are the people you follow that you kind of take inspiration or learn from?
Oh man, I can't say that I have specific names who come to mind because I'm actually awful with names. I was also discussing this with a LinkedIn friend. He was like, yeah, we've been in touch for ages. He's like, but I keep forgetting your name. I'm like, that's horrible. But at the same time, I get it.
Yeah.
But I feel like, so my approach with this, when I was looking for people on LinkedIn, for instance, to learn from, is that I would search based on topics.
Right.
And then I would do my research on the people who would pop up, and I would see, how are they staying relevant? How are people reacting to their content? Are they just blowing up because of pods and AI engagement, or are people really valuing what they say? Because it can be kind of hard to distinguish. And sometimes you'll also find someone who you think is super legit, and over time they become a sellout because they're focused more on the ludicrous growth as opposed to delivering real value, which is also why I'm kind of hesitant to name specific names. Because if you asked me 2 years ago, I think maybe 60% of my list have become people who are focused on the wrong things now. So I don't want to say,
right?
Yes, exactly. So I don't want to say learn from this person. They always know what they're saying, because it's not true. So I would focus more on researching topics, researching the specific people, talking about them when you find those topics, as opposed to just saying, this person, they're God. They always know what to say. They're always right. So I'd say be skeptical, do your research, and be open to adapting and acknowledging that sometimes people, their ideas change. They're not as valuable as you thought they were.
Yeah, I get that. It reminds you of, I'm a big fan of Marvel and DC if you're into comics, but there's a line in the Batman where, I can't remember who said it, but it's, live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And it's that sometimes when you're kind of growing, it's, you're growing as a person, but at the same time, comes a point where you can over abuse that, it's this kind of idea of capitalism and kind of greed. But I totally get it. There are people out there who, kind of their intentions have changed. And I think what I like about you, and from what I'm getting in this podcast and looking at your content is that you're very genuine. You're not afraid to kind of be upfront, direct, and, piss some people off. And I think that's actually the approach that I'm taking now as well. It's like, who cares? As long as your intention's good, if it rattles bones or gets people engaging, that is great marketing too, right? There's obviously a line where you don't want to cross and be too direct for the sake of it. But I think maybe that's for the people listening, creating content that's genuinely you. And I think when you create from that place of not being afraid of saying how you really feel, more people will actually engage and connect with you. That's the weirdest thing, What do you think? Is that accurate, or am I way off?
I think you're spot on as can be, honestly. So I do definitely make a point of not being super negative and always just saying or shouting my unpopular opinions and polarizing people. As you mentioned, Twitter is a lot about polarizing, and I don't think that's always the best approach. But I do think when I was first creating content, I was trying too hard to resonate with everybody in the world
Right.
and trying
Right.
way too hard to be liked. But what I realized is that even when I was doing that, people still didn't like what I was saying. There was always someone who would try to argue with me about anything.
Exactly.
I remember making a post about the weather because, again, we talked about this before. I don't remember if we were recording, but we talked about how, UK, Dutch weather really sucks. And I made a post. I was like, I'm so excited to see the sunshine. And someone commented and they were like, you need to learn to be more grateful because at least you're alive even when the weather is bad. And I was like, what?
It's extreme.
Are you crazy? Are you kidding me right now? So yeah, ever since then, I've really embraced the approach of just be yourself. You want to connect with people who are like-minded, who share some like-minded opinions, even if you guys
Right.
don't always agree all the time, 100% of the time. So I definitely advise people to be themselves without trying to antagonize and polarize everyone, because that's also not a sustainable tactic.
Going with extreme. It reminds me of a video I had like way back 2 years ago. I think there was a negative comment. He wasn't a hater, but he just came from an academic background. And you'll probably agree with me on this, that academic people, they're very logical. So if something's wrong or there's no data to back it up, they'll argue with you.
Yeah.
It's kind of dealing with that. But at the same time, my intention in that video was to kind of help people. And there's more people who appreciated the topic of the video than people who were disagreeing with it. It's a fine balance. And I think as a content marketer, I guess you kind of find your own footing in place and like, how far do I go with being honest,
Yep, absolutely. I think there's a time and place for everything. And the more you write, the more you talk to people, the more you kind of get a feel for what is and isn't appropriate, I would say.
I want to segue into back on the career, which is, I think the word career is probably a bit overused, and I don't necessarily believe in it in the traditional way, like working in a job for like 20 years or 30 years, whatever. But what would be some of your biggest challenges throughout your career in marketing specifically, and how did you overcome them?
The one challenge that I encountered is kind of the traditional idea that you have to stay in a job for a long period of time to become respected and trusted. And I definitely didn't do that. And it's something I was always struggling with. And when I interviewed, when I was working full time, it's something that always came up. They'd always ask, why did you only stay here for a year and a half, 2 years?
I get that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're working in the startup and scale up space, and especially when you're a marketer, you deal with so many things like budget cuts and restructurings and not being able to be paid what you believe you're worth, and just marketing departments being fully cut. And I think a lot of people don't realize that in the hiring space and recruiting. So they're always kind of quick to judge. So overcoming those judgments and figuring out how to answer those questions in a way that wasn't like placing the blame on someone else. So I wasn't saying, well, it's all their fault that I ended up here, but also kind of taking responsibility and saying, well, I did what was best for me and here's what I learned from it. I think kind of finding that balance while job hunting was a really big obstacle to overcome. And every time I'd go to a new interview, I'd always be like, oh gosh, it's going to happen again. Like I'm already dreading that question, that conversation.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that because so technically I'm building an agency as well right now, but I also still do kind of more executional freelancing stuff in performance marketing. But last year I was still in this notion of wanting to be an employee just to get cash flow. And if you look at my experience, it's very nonlinear. I'm here for like 2 months and then there's a gap and then here for 6 months, and trying to justify that's very difficult. But I do think, at least in my experience, that will become a lot more normal in the future. I think now there's that bit of friction. It's like remote work. Back in the day, like remote work, seriously, you're going to be 5 days at your home doing the work. That's not, that's not right. Whereas now it's like most companies, you work remotely. So yeah, I definitely get that. In terms of if you were starting again in marketing, looking back, would you approach it differently? Anything you feel like so let's say someone's listening who maybe wants to be like you, a B2B content marketer starting their own agency, what maybe lessons have you learned throughout, or is there anything you would change about it?
I've always lived life with the idea of no regrets because I think, everything that happened to me, everything I experienced got me here today. And I'm super excited to be where I am, even though my education was everywhere and life was everywhere. But I guess my biggest piece of advice would be listen to your heart, listen to your brain, and think about what you want, as opposed to being really quick to listen to your parents, your friends, your teachers, the people around you, because they're biased. They had their own experiences that made them the way they are. and they're great to learn from. I'm not saying fully dismiss everything they're saying because they're older than you, they've experienced more life most likely. But at the same time, just because they say something, they believe something's 100% right, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So that's what I see in my own path. The people who were questioning what I was doing, the people who were saying, well, be careful of that, that's not a good idea, 10 years down the line, or the people who are saying, wow, it's great that you did what you did. It's great that you stood up for what you believe and you gave yourself the life you want as opposed to the life others wanted for you. So that would be my biggest piece of advice.
That's really good advice. It's like seeing the opportunity much more than seeing what could go wrong, right?
Yeah.
What could actually go right. No, I love that. Since obviously we're called futurist marketers, this question is going to be one of the ones I always ask at the very end. Any predictions in content marketing? And the second question to that, any predictions in the world of marketing in general?
I think this applies to both, but obviously generative AI is here to stay. I still talk to a lot of marketers online and just personally in my life who are saying, well, Gen AI is here to take our jobs. It's horrible. It's taking away human elements of marketing. It's getting rid of creativity. And my response to that is, okay, but it's here to stay. So either you can complain about it, you can see how it's ruining your life, it's taking your career from you, or you can learn to work with it. You can upskill alongside Gen AI. You can learn to use it to your advantage, and then you can stay ahead of the marketers who are complaining. So I'd say that's the biggest change that's happening. And I mean, in the last couple of years, we went from what's Gen AI to Gen AI this, Gen AI that. And I think in the next years with the new platforms coming out, I mean, DeepSeek is now huge, and I just learned about it like a week ago. So I think it's going to be huge, and marketers who were kind of on the fence about it, they need to climb over that fence and learn how to use it to their advantage instead of resisting and complaining.
On that point, it reminds you of, I'm a big fan of history, kind of looking back. So it's like the marketers that do complain about AI, or at least maybe they don't want to use AI, maybe they feel like it's too technical, it can't complement them. It reminds you of farmers back in the day in the Industrial Revolution who, when machines were invented to essentially help them with their farmland, who were against it. Those were the farmers that were kind of phased out, but the farmers who owned land, who adopted the machines and used it for their benefit, won in the end. So I feel like it's the same thing with AI, or even with the aspect of content marketing. It's a tool at the end of the day, and use it. It's there for you, and it's an extension of who you are. It's not really meant to take over you. Especially with AI, to be honest, I'm not threatened by AI at all. Especially if you've seen what it can do currently. It's going to take a long time before it's better than us in terms of creating content, in my opinion.
I fully agree with that. For me, it's a phenomenal tool for things like editing and brainstorming and idea generation. And it can kind of help paraphrase content. It can give you new ideas and inspiration. But I don't believe it can do my job for me. I don't believe it can replace me. I see so many people try and they're saying, yeah, but I don't even have to hire a marketer. And I'm like, well, we can tell you haven't hired a marketer. You're not fooling anyone.
Yeah. You can tell when content's AI driven. For me, it's like within 3 seconds, I just know a certain word, or even if it's a YouTube video, it's very obvious. I want to say thank you, Marina, for joining the podcast. Really, really good episode on content marketing and kind of being able to synthesize who you are and creating what's true to you and using that as leverage rather than weakness. Yeah, where can people find you, and is there anything you want to promote?
First of all, thank you so much. Really enjoyed our conversation. I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn, Marina Krivonossova. You can always DM me. You can always find my website, retoldmarketing.com, and reach out via there. I try to be as responsive and accessible to folks as possible, whether they want to work together, or just chat, or learn something new. So feel free to reach out.
Sounds good. Right. Thanks, Marina. Speak soon.
Thanks.